This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Good morning, I'm Justin Warmoth. Florida is attracting more new residents than any other state in the country. Nearly 1,000 people move here every day, a trend analysts believe will continue for at least the next 5 years. And that begs the question, where are those folks going to live? We see neighborhoods being built. We see new apartment complexes taking shape. But advocates say not enough is being done to address the state's affordable housing crisis. This morning, Austin Valley, co-founder of Orlando YIMBY, is here to talk about how the nonprofit is working to make sure Central Florida is more inclusive.
YIMBY stands for Yes in My Backyard. And we are a pro-housing organization. And so we often stand in opposition to what some folks might call a NIMBY, which is someone who says, yes, we need housing. Yes, we need apartments. Yes, we need to bring this sort of development into our city, but not in my backyard. And we'll come in and say, actually, we do want new neighbors. We talk about Orlando being an inclusive city. And we say that inclusivity starts with letting people live here. And so we're going to show up and advocate to make sure that we're providing space for people of all sorts of incomes to live in our city. And so that's what we do. We advocate for what we call housing abundance, so that there's enough housing for folks to live here in the City Beautiful.
I mean, so many people are moving to the state of Florida, as we have seen. It's nothing new, but it's really, I think the pandemic has exacerbated this with the ability to live and work from home. People want to go somewhere nice and warm and all that. And so Florida really checks a lot of boxes. And so, 850 people a day between now and 2026 will be moving to the state of Florida. Where are they going to go? Because not everyone will be making the same amount of money. And the housing, as we've already seen, is out of control. Rent is out of control. It's just, where are the majority of these folks going to live?
Yeah, it's such an important question. I like to say that housing is not procreation. So a lot of people feel like, we're building this housing, and so people are going to come. But the people are coming, and trying to get the people to stop coming is like trying to stand in the middle of the Mississippi River and saying stop. Right? People are moving to Florida for a lot of reasons that are in large part outside of our control. And by the way, the only thing that's worse than a growing region is a not growing region. You can go to a lot of places around the country that have seen population decline, and it has a whole host of issues that are a lot worse in some cases than what we're dealing with here. So we welcome folks to come to our region. We think that that's good for our economy. It's good for our community. It's good for our society. But like you said, we have to have a place for those people to live. And at this point, there's a compounding issue. If you look at some census, the census actually released some data just recently that showed that over the last 10 years, the population in Greater Orlando has increased at a rate of 1.5 times as fast as the total housing units have increased. So even over the last 10 years, we have not kept up with the supply of housing that's needed in our region for people to live. Now, that being said, we talk a lot about what we call housing near opportunity. So we want that housing to be near jobs. We want that housing to be near transit. What we're not talking about is housing that's 35 miles from the core of our city, that's being built over wetlands and conservation areas and rural areas. We're looking at parking lots downtown and saying, why isn't this a high rise? Right? We're looking at single family homes 3 miles from downtown and saying, how about some duplexes? How about some fourplexes? How about some 3-floor garden style apartments? We're not talking about putting high rises in every corner of the city, but we've got to loosen up our ability to put a little bit more of what we call gentle density throughout the regions that are already built, because the regions that are already built already have connectivity to power and connectivity to water and connectivity to roads, and they already have shops. And so we've got to find more opportunities to put people where we're already built out, or else we're going to continue to spread further and further. We're going to have longer and longer commutes. We're going to be building over our environmentally sensitive areas. And so that's what we focus on is again, what we call housing near opportunity. And that tends to be near the core of the city.
I think that's so important to hammer on, because someone might be watching this. They're like, well, I'm fine. I'm doing well. I got my place to live. I don't have to worry about affordability when it comes to housing. But the trickle-down effects of not being able to have the people needed to work at your favorite restaurant and what have you is significant, because then those places will not be able to staff who they need to staff and thus stay in business and, serve you dinner at your favorite restaurant. Can we expand more on that and the difficulties that not having the affordable housing in place does for sprawling cities like, let's say, Orlando.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on an important point, right? Which is that we want our cities to be full of the people who are engaged in those particular communities. You mentioned a few types of workers. I would add also teachers.
Yeah.
Can teachers live in the communities in which they're teaching? More and more, the answer to that is no. There's all sorts of types of jobs.
Police officers, firefighters. I mean, a number.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Another one I would add too is families. A lot of times families want to stay close to each other. And so even if someone's watching the thing, well, I've got my house, this is great. It went up 20% in value last year. Maybe it'll go up 15% in value next year. What we like to talk about is, well, are your children going to be able to live near you one day? Or are they going to have to go live far away? And if you're living in downtown Orlando, are they going to have to go live somewhere further in Osceola County or Lake County because they can't find a place to afford? And so we see this through conversations with folks in the communities, that families are being forced to move further and further away because what was traditionally, I grew up in this neighborhood, my kids grew up in the neighborhood, and my parents grew up in the neighborhood. That is harder and harder to do when we're being priced out. And so you're seeing a lot of neighborhoods around, not just, we don't just focus on city of Orlando, but when I talk about Orlando, I mean the greater Orlando area. But you see these areas where families can't afford to all stay there together anymore, and they're having to split up and live further away.
I probably should have done this earlier, but I think it is important. People see affordable housing in the news, they hear about it, what have you. They may not know what affordable housing means. We're not just saying, places that are more affordable. I mean, there is a definition of affordable housing and who can qualify for it. Can we go over that? If you can, give us the cliff notes on it.
Yeah, also a really important point. So when we talk about, there's housing affordability and what we might call lowercase affordable housing, and there's what we would call uppercase affordable housing. And what we typically are talking about there is housing that is dedicated for folks based on their income. And so there's a few ways to measure this. It would typically look at the area median income. So you would look at the median income in the greater Orlando area. And then the units in that apartment would have to be priced at a way that they could be affordable to folks who make that particular type of income. Often we're looking at roughly 30% of someone's income would be dedicated to housing. So you work the math out, and then you make it such that those units could be afforded by folks who make that level of income. The reason I think it's important to talk about this is that the reality is that almost by definition, because you're looking at median income, almost by definition, most people will not be eligible for programs like that. And so those programs are really, really important. But what I think is important is that we don't lead, even when I talk about something like the Sadowski Fund or these dollars that are going to that capital A, capital H affordable housing, the reality is that most people will not directly benefit from those types of units. And I'm of the belief that someone who's making at median income or a little bit before median income, which, by the way, in greater Orlando is not a whole lot of money. Someone making $60,000 a year should also have an affordable place to live. And there are not necessarily public programs in place to support them. And so what are we going to do to support them? We have to think a little bit creatively about the policies we're putting in place. And that's where we come in and we try to think about this more holistically to make sure that everybody in the county, everybody in the city, everybody in the region has some place to live, even if you're not eligible for an income constrained program like that.
Coming up, Valley will discuss affordable housing legislation at the state level, or lack thereof, and why ignoring the problem will eventually catch up with us. Stay with us.
This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Welcome back. Housing in Florida is more unaffordable than ever. Rent prices skyrocketing, and becoming a homeowner seems impossible for a growing number of Floridians. On top of that, advocates say not enough is being done to address the affordable housing crisis. Austin Valley co-founder of Orlando YIMBY is back with us to explain why the issue needs more attention in Tallahassee. I know that people who live around here in the greater Orlando, Central Florida area, it seems like every other week there's a new apartment building going up and new housing that they're trying to, I mean, as they say, guys not making any more land. And so they're seeing it. They're seeing the construction. They're seeing the new apartments going up. But the problem is that those apartments and those communities are not addressing the critical nature of having a place that, whether it's the entire building or a few units here and there, to address the affordable housing issue, right? I mean, that's an important point to this. And I know that there are Senate bills and things going on right now during the Florida legislative session to maybe make it easier for builders to incorporate this. We'll touch on that, but that's another thing, is that not just because it's an apartment going up does not mean it's affordable.
Yeah, that's right. There's three things that I think of on this. The one is that you're right. It's easy to say, well, I see cranes, building is going on, and it's sort of anecdotal and well, I see all of this happening. But again, when we look at the data, the last 10 years showed us, I mentioned this earlier, that housing has not kept up with population. The other data point I'd add is that the rental vacancy rate right now is only about 5%, and that's considered full in the industry. And when there's no room to move around, then that means that the landlords have the power and the tenants don't. And so there's a power mismatch there. You really want to see vacancy rates closer to 10, 15%. When you have stories of a unit goes up for rent and there's 180 applicants the day that it goes on, well, now there's no power, right? A power for a tenant to get a better price for themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's one. The other one I'd add too is that new housing that's being built is by definition typically market rate. And in the same way that, my 15-year-old Honda Civic is cheaper than the new Honda Civic. And if we made building new Honda Civics illegal, then my Honda Civic would become much more valuable really quickly. And so if the market rate is higher, then when we're building new housing, it's going to be market rate, and that's higher. And so we have to think about it holistically. And then the third point is, you're absolutely right, is that there needs to be a role for public dollars to invest in income-constrained housing. And so you look at something like, at the state level, something like the Sadowski Fund, which is the fund that is dedicated to affordable units throughout the state, that over the last 20 years, the Florida State Legislature has rated over $2 billion from that fund, that if that had not occurred, then there would be $2 billion worth of affordable housing throughout the state. And so, yeah, it's all of these things combined. And our view at Orlando YIMBY is that you need the market rate housing and you need the affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And without one or the other, you're not approaching the problem holistically. And so we advocate for both of those things and try to make sure that state, local, and federal governments are focusing on both of them.
I probably should have done this earlier, but I think it is important. Do you feel like Florida politicians just don't give this enough of a thought? I mean, they know that this is an issue, and yet it's just not necessarily at the forefront. It's not someone's. I mean, we have heard a lot of these lawmakers in the state House, state Senate talk about like this is a priority for them as they get into session, and yet nothing seems to be of substance getting through, getting heard, and ultimately going to a vote. And so if we can't do that, is there another avenue to making this like a reality?
Yeah, our local leaders that are in Tallahassee do prioritize this issue, but not the leadership in Tallahassee. They don't prioritize this issue. They're making up problems to try to solve them, and so it doesn't get the attention. I shouldn't say it doesn't get the attention. Our local leaders bring it up to bring it attention, but it doesn't get the legislation that would be required to solve an issue like that. So we often look to local solutions to try to solve the issues that are there. There's also federal solutions, right? A lot of these affordable housing projects are funded through federal dollars. And so a lot of these sort of issues can be solved through legislation that's putting more funding into it, that's remediating maybe some affordable housing units today that are decaying to some extent, that the federal dollars can help to supplant that a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, we are stuck in Tallahassee. I don't think that they're going to be solving this one for us. I think that our local leaders see it as an issue, and that federal leaders do to some extent as well. The other piece of this is that, look, there's a tension in that most of Floridians are homeowners and not renters. And that's true even in the greater Orlando area as well. And so there's just an awkward fact that we have to talk out loud about, which is that when I say that home prices went up by 20% last year, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends who you ask. And it depends on if you own a home and it went up 20%, and if you're a renter and you're trying to find a place to live. And so that's a little bit of an awkwardness, and it's a political weird conversation to have, that when we talk about these growing home prices, for some that's a bad thing, for some that's actually a good thing. And so the politics are a little bit uncomfortable and awkward in that fact. And so, we talked earlier about why actually we view that the housing affordability crisis does affect folks who own a home and think it doesn't affect them, that is actually broader than that. But there's a level of education that has to go along with that has to be infused into our politics a little bit.
I mean, yeah, it is a good thing if you own a home. That's great. But if you're, a lot of people are not going to sell their house, because where will they go? They've lost whatever they've made in the house to buy the next one because of where prices are right now. And so you're just seeing people who need to buy a house dealing with a few comps here and there in the zip code. And it's like, well, I can't afford that. A few houses that ultimately did get sold. And so, yes, that's the issue. And I get where your point is on saying, hey, listen, it's tough to say something bad about, home prices going up, especially what a lot of people have been through with the housing crisis back in 2008 and 2009. So I get that point. So ultimately, how would you want to leave this to our viewers? I mean, I know that we have a wide range of folks watching with different backgrounds, different jobs, different incomes. But if you could put this into if you could wrap this in a bow, how would you?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that we need more housing. Mm-hmm. There's not enough housing. There's a shortage of housing. And so how we go about getting that housing, there's a conversation to be had. How is that funded? What are we asking of developers? Especially, and here we have a very strong point of view, which is where are we putting that housing? But we can talk through those things and we can work through those things, but we have to be talking from the same point of view. And at least in our view, we have to accept the fact that there is not enough housing. And if we accept that fact, then we can have some really healthy conversations about making sure that housing is where it needs to go, making sure that it's near transit, making sure that we're funding transit so that the housing makes sense where it's at. There's a lot of other conversations to be had, but we all have to get on the same page. And Orlando Yimby does a lot of work putting out the data, writing op-eds about this, talking to elected officials. We have to accept the fact that there is not enough housing and then solve from there.
And we have a special section of our website dedicated to the influx of new residents and how it's impacting the state. Just head to clickorlando.com/boomtown. I'm Justin Wormuth. Hope you have a great Sunday.